Hi, have you ever heard about the Ant-Man? Welcome to Reach for Life program in which we explore the Ant-Man today. Listen to John 1:14 and 18. Those are the verses. The Word became a human being. He made his home with us. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only is God and is at the Father's side. The one at the Father's side has shown us what God is like. Wow. Who is Jesus? He is God and becoming one of us. Jesus is God's way of saying, look at my son, Jesus, and then you will see me. Listen to my son, and then you will hear me. So let's take a closer look at Jesus and learn what God is like. I will invite Angana to read out for us John 8, verses 1 to 11.
Now we are going to read John chapter 8, verses 1 to 11. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At sunrise, he arrived again in the temple courtyard. All the people gathered around him there. He sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman. She had been caught committing adultery. They made her stand in front of a group. They said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught sleeping with a man who was not her husband. In the law, Moses commanded us to kill such women by throwing stones at them. Now what do you say?" They were trying to trap Jesus with that question. They wanted to have a reason to bring charges against him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. They kept asking him questions. So he stood up and said to them, "Has any of you not sinned? Then you be the first to throw a stone at her." He bent down again and wrote on the ground. Those who heard what he had said began to go away. They left one at a time, the older ones first. Soon only Jesus was left. The woman was still standing there. Jesus stood up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Hasn't anyone found you guilty?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then I don't find you guilty either." Jesus said, "Go now and live your life of sin."
Thank you very much, Angana, for that reading. But hey, what can we learn from this passage that we've just heard? I will invite Melinda to help us do just that in this important segment in this program, Reach for Life, and the segment is called Learn.
What an amazing story. Remember, Jesus shows us what God is like. So let's go through the story and see what we learn about God. Notice that Jesus cares about the truth. It's sunrise, and he is eager to get on with his day. And his main goal is to teach people. It's the most important thing. Since God is like Jesus, that means that, number one, God shows you what is true. He wants to teach us what is true. How can we know what is real and what is right and what is true? And notice that in verse 3 and 4, the teachers of the law said to Jesus, "Teacher." See that? The teachers call him teacher. The point is, even all the scientists and smartest people in the world cannot know the truth about God all on their own. But thankfully, God sends Jesus to show us what is true. Let's see what else we learn about God by looking at Jesus. So there is a woman who was having sex with someone else's husband, and she has been caught in the act. In that culture, there were laws against this. Instead of dealing with the crime, the men who catch her decide that they want to set a trap for Jesus. See, they are jealous of Jesus. So they drag the woman to him. They believe that if Jesus keeps the law, then he will punish her. Verse 6 tells us what Jesus did. What did he do? It says, Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. What is Jesus writing in the sand? To be honest, we don't know. But many students of the Bible say that he was writing down the secret sins of the man. That makes sense when he stands up and says to them, "Has any one of you not sinned?" We see this in verse 7. These men may be standing there being so self-righteous. They may be thinking they are better than the woman, for example. But Jesus looks at them and sees deep into their hearts, and he knows everything they have done or said that is wrong and evil. This also makes sense when in verse 19 we are told that those who heard what he said began to go away. They left one at a time, the older ones first. The men have been so focused on the woman's sin, but now Jesus has quietly pointed out their sins. Since God is like Jesus, that means that, number 2, God knows everything about you. He knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows your dreams and hopes for the future. He knows the things that make you sad or fearful. And he also knows all the bad things you have done and said and even thought. What else do we learn about God by looking at Jesus? Imagine being this woman. She is pulled out of the bed. What about the married man she was sleeping with? He's left free. These men take it easy on the guilty man, but they are rough and horrible with the woman. They drag her through the street. She must feel so ashamed. Then they make her stand in front of Jesus and tell Jesus to throw the first stone at her. They will join in and stone her to death. She must be so scared. Everyone is looking at her. What does she do? She must be crying and begging for mercy. But she's not looking around, she's looking down, maybe covering her face in shame and in fear that a stone will strike her. So, what does Jesus do? First, he gets everyone to stop looking at the woman. He does this by bending down and writing in the sand. People must be trying to see what he is writing. This also calms everyone down. Then after the men walk away, we are told in verses 9 and 10 that soon only Jesus was left. The woman was still standing there. Jesus stood up and asked her, "Woman, where are they?" She can hardly believe not one stone has been thrown at her and that they have all left. Jesus is the only man there and he talks to her. Jesus has arranged it so that he can have a one-on-one chat with her. So the third thing we learn is that since God is like Jesus, God is gentle and protective. None of the men who accused the woman cared about her as a person at all. But Jesus did. She is scared, but Jesus protects her. She is broken, so Jesus is gentle with her. And that is what God is like to each one of us, gentle and protective. He is not a cruel God. He is very kind. What else do we learn about God by looking at Jesus? Listen to Jesus' words in verses 10 and 11. "Hasn't anyone found you guilty?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then I don't find you guilty either," Jesus said. Jesus forgives her. He says, "Not guilty." Now, of course, she is guilty, but this is Jesus' way of showing her mercy. But does that mean that Jesus is fine with the woman doing any bad things she wants? No, because he then says, "Go now and live your life of sin." We see this in verse 11. But Jesus is not saying, "Try harder to be good." No, he is giving her the power to change her ways. So the last thing we learn is, since God is like Jesus, it means that God gives forgiveness and the power to change. When we say or do bad things, we are guilty. We don't have to look down in shame and fear. What we need to do is to look up into the loving face of Jesus, who forgives us and gives us power to change. Wow, Jesus is wonderful. And since God is like Jesus, that means that God is wonderful.
Oh, wow. We're learning great things in this program, Rich for Life. So thank you, Melinda, for helping us just to learn those truths. But hey, how can we live? Monica, Ogie, and Busi, it's your turn. Help us to understand this.
I love that God shows me what is true. Every time when I watch videos, movies, or listen to people, I realize everyone has their own opinion. And I've wondered if we can ever really know what is right, what is real, and what is true. Is God real? What is the purpose of my life? What is the best way to live? I ask these questions, and it makes me so happy that God wants to give me all the answers to these questions.
I love the part about God knowing everything about me. Sometimes I feel so alone, My parents don't understand me. My friends don't understand me. Even I don't understand myself. So I always wonder if anyone knows me, like really knows me. Is anyone that interested in my life? So, if God cares so much about me and knows everything about me, it makes me happy.
The best part was the end, that God is so gentle and protective. We don't know what Jesus was drawing in the sand, but I think maybe he was drawing a big circle or protection around the woman.
Which means that he was a man ahead of his time. Nowadays, we are learning more about how men should protect women, not hurt them or use them. Men are physically stronger than women, and they often have more power in society. So it is easy for them to use this power against women. But Jesus teaches us to use it for girls and women.
Yes, but men also often are broken, powerless, weak, or scared. And it is great that Jesus isn't a bully. He doesn't scare us with his power. He is gentle with each of us. He wants us to look him in the face, and his face is so kind.
And how awesome is that? That he also forgives us and gives us the power to change. It would be so easy for Jesus to condemn the woman, but he doesn't. He gives her mercy instead. And I don't know about you, but I know I need God's mercy and forgiveness.
What amazes me is how God became one of us. Jesus has great power, but in this story, he doesn't stand over the woman. He bends down in front of her. And God is so big, but by becoming Jesus, by becoming an ant like us, he comes down to our level. He is humble.
Wow. So God walked in our shoes. He was one of us. And therefore, he knows what it feels like to go through hard times.
Did anyone else think about the Marvel comic superhero Ant-Man? His superpower is becoming as small as an ant.
No, I didn't, but I like it. One of God's superpowers was to become small, like one of us.
But not everyone knew that he was God. It's like a celebrity wearing sunglasses and ordinary clothing and maybe even a hat walking on the road, and you don't even realize that they are famous.
I like that. Jesus is the most famous person who ever lived, and yet he was so ordinary, like one of us.
But some people, like the disciples of Jesus, did realize who he was. And still today, God wants us to realize that Jesus was not just a great teacher in history. He is God who became human. On that note, we have to wrap this up. I can't wait to get to part 3 in our 10-part journey called Believe.
Until next time, we have to keep reaching for life. But hey, before we go, I need to say thank you so much to Ogi Yonke Sitoli, Angana Kaonga, Monica Murava, as well as Melinda Kajilima. We had also Busisiwe Matebule. These are my 5 great friends in the program, Reach for Life, which you don't have to miss. So send an email to info@twrafrica.org. info@twrafrica.org. But hey, the important one is possibly the WhatsApp number. And here it is. Remember to add +27 78 014 7955 +27 78 014 7955. So send me a WhatsApp and tell us what you learned from this important segment, or indeed from the whole program of Reach for Life. My name is Victor, and I've been delighted to have been with you. Join me next time as we keep reaching for life.